when a compassionate individual discovered a deer tethered behind a residence in Flossier, Texas. He promptly contacted the appropriate authorities. To his surprise, a responsive police officer from the area arrived shortly thereafter, but little did this man know what awaited him when the officer arrived. Residing in Flossier, Texas, the man was going about his morning routine outdoors when he suddenly heard peculiar snorting noises. Intrigued, he turned in the direction of the sounds, unable to identify their source. However, he was convinced that an unfamiliar animal was in his vicinity. Determined to investigate, he followed the mysterious sounds, eventually leading him to the backyard of a home that was still under construction. There he discovered a deer that had been tied up. Once the deer spotted the man, it was as if he knew help had come, and he stopped snorting. Swinging into action, the man loosened the deer and alerted the police. Within a few minutes, a police officer, Kelvin Zisheng, arrived at the scene. The police officer untangled the deer's antlers from the rope, and from that point on, something extraordinary unfolded. After the rescue, the officer and neighbors launched an inquiry to uncover who had tied the deer and why. They gathered information from the neighbors, and upon returning to the scene, were surprised to find the freed deer still nearby, standing behind a door. Instead of fleeing to the woods, the deer appeared to have a purpose, and it became evident when it approached Officer Kelvin, standing beside him. I tried to spook him to get him to run back out into the woods, but he wasn't having it. He wanted to hang out with us, Officer Kelvin said. When the cop headed back to his car up front, the deer also followed him and continued staring at him. It was as if he was trying to say, "Hey, Mr. Nice Guy, thank you for saving me. I would love to be your friend if you don't mind." As much as this was a sweet gesture, Officer Kelvin was worried about the neighbors and the animal's safety. So he chased him back into the woods behind the home, and this cop drove away, thinking that was the last time he would ever see the sweet animal. But their story wasn't over yet. Just 2 days later, Officer Kelvin returned to the scene, where he was being interviewed by ABC News. Just at the point where he was describing how sweet and kind the animal was, something scurried out of the woods. Turning to face the woods, this cop spotted the same deer running towards him. "There he is," a dazed Officer Kelvin screamed. He wasn't expecting the animal's return. When the deer finally got close to where the cop was standing, he nuzzled him and let the officer scratch his head. "He came back to see me," the officer said as the deer, whom the kids on the street had already named Hank, continued to nuzzle him. Once again, the deer refused to return to the woods. He just wanted to stay beside the police officer. Sadly, not all our wishes are granted. As much as the police officer also fancied the animal, he knew he couldn't leave him wandering around. So he decided it was best to give him a better life. This cop then reached out to Texas Parks and Wildlife, and the game wardens determined Hank was eligible for relocation. As of today, Hank lives in a safe and peaceful animal sanctuary where no harm comes to him. But Officer Kelvin isn't the only one who is kind to deer. When this man rescued a dying deer, the animal had no zeal to live or fight for her life. But this man wouldn't give up. Then this beautiful thing happened. In December 2015, an unnamed driver came across a wounded deer, injured by a careless motorist, lying helpless on the ground. Concerned for the animal's well-being, the man swiftly contacted the Wildlife Aid Foundation. The call was answered by Simon Cowell, the organization's founder. Before Simon's arrival, 2 cars positioned themselves, one behind and the other in front of the injured deer, preventing other vehicles from approaching the frightened and struggling creature. As Simon reached the scene, he initially believed his mission was to transport the deer safely to the office. However, he was about to confront an unexpected crisis. Approaching the deer, Simon whispered soothingly, "Hey, darling, are you okay, sweetheart? I'm here now." Kneeling to assess the severity of the injury, he observed a deep gash above the deer's eye that required immediate stitches. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Simon knew he had to act swiftly to give the animal a chance at survival. Summoning all his strength, he lifted the deer with his bare hands, cradling her close to his chest, much like a mother comforting her frightened child. You see, besides this animal's injury, There was also another reason why Simon needed to act fast. Deer are very nervous animals and do not cope well with being handled. They often suffer capture myopathy, a complex disease associated with the capture or handling of any wild animal. When a man rescued a deer found tied behind a house in Flossier, Texas, he promptly contacted the authorities, and a responding police officer left him astounded. This man, residing in Flossier, Texas, was outdoors preparing for his day when he heard unusual snorting sounds, but he couldn't identify their source. Understanding that deer can succumb to capture myopathy from excessive stress, the man wasted no time. He rushed the injured animal to his car, carefully placed it on the seat, and sped off to an animal facility. Upon arrival, he covered the deer's head with a towel to ease her into the unfamiliar environment. Emma, a staff member, prepared to treat the animal, gently stitching its wounds with care and a sense of urgency. Fortunately, the deer's skull remained intact, making the process faster. Once the stitching was complete, the deer received cleaning and painkillers. While everyone was relieved to finish this part of the work, a new, more challenging task lay ahead. Even though the deer's wound had been stitched, the question remained: could she function normally? The rescuers were eager to find out. Accompanied by one of his team members, Simon returned the deer to the same woods where he had initially found her. Simon held hope that, once she had overcome the fear and stress, she would regain her strength, resume grazing, and embrace life as she once did. Crouching beside the deer, he offered gentle pats and words of encouragement. If she lowers her head, it's a sign she's giving up, Simon informed his colleague, anxiously awaiting any sign of improvement. Regrettably, in a heart-wrenching moment, the deer's head dropped backward. It was evident she had lost hope, overwhelmed by the trauma from the accident. It appeared that all the efforts of Simon and his team had been in vain. However, if the deer had given up, Simon had not. Determined, he gently nudged the deer's head forward and continued to encourage her. "Hey, sweet girl, you've got to show the world how resilient you are. Nothing can keep you down. So come on, get up, darling." Despite initial setbacks, Simon's determination to see her walk remained unwavering. He wasn't going anywhere until his wish came true. "I know you were hurt. I know you're bruised, but I trust you. You can do it," he said. Finally, after plenty of back and forth, the animal stood on her legs and started walking. Sadly, she had only taken a few steps when she collapsed to the floor again. It was truly heart-wrenching to witness the deer's struggle to walk. Simon, feeling disheartened, questioned if he had made the right decision by rescuing her. Would she ever return to her former graceful life? Was hope entirely lost? Despite these doubts, Simon remained determined. Carrying the deer in his arms, he ventured deeper into the woods. He believed the deer needed time to regain her composure. Upon reaching the woods, he gently placed her on her feet and assisted her as she took tentative steps. Would this effort bear fruit? Gradually, the deer began to show signs of renewed energy, her ears perking up, and she became more alert. Step by step, she grew stronger, eventually running freely. Go on, sweetheart," Simon exclaimed with passion and excitement. The beautiful sight brought tears to Simon's eyes, and he watched until the deer disappeared from view. Seeing her regain her balance brought immense peace. It was a day to cherish forever.